2, 1, 8.
On KBLA, James Farr's on the mic, lifting up the people, keeping hope in sight. With Altadena spirit, he fights the good fight, speaking truth to power, shining the light. Flames try to break us, but we're standing tall. Lost our homes, but we ain't lost at all. Through the smoke and the ashes, we see the sun. Altadena's fight has just begun. Just begun. We'll rise again, we'll build it strong. Through the struggle, yes, we belong. Hand in hand, through dust and pain, Altadena's heart remains.
Live from Leimert Park, KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening to The Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, and I am your host, James Farr. This is the show of record, and we are chronicling for the nation the deadly and devastating January 2025 Eaton Canyon Fire, which decimated a black community. I want to thank you for allowing me into your homes, into your cars. Maybe you're in your garage this morning. Perhaps you're out with the family getting ready for some activities on this holiday weekend. Thank you for allowing me to share this space with you. I want to invite you to follow us on social media at KBLA 1580 across all the social media platforms. And also you can follow me at James Farr Live across all of those platforms. And if you've missed any of our previous episodes, our podcasts are available wherever you get your podcast. We're on most major platforms. My favorite just happens to be going over to the KBLA YouTube page, and you can listen to previous episodes at your leisure. Today we got a pretty good, an interesting program, and you'll let me know as we continue this journey of understanding this black community in the San Gabriel Mountains, San Gabriel Valley. Today I have Tina Jackson Williams, and she is the vice chair of the Pasadena 710 Restorative Justice Committee. And we want to frame up and kind of understand. I know a lot of folks know about old Pasadena, and some folks have heard of Northwest Pasadena, but just south of old Pasadena was a thriving black community. But eminent domain had its way back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I'm going to check in with a little bit of sound to bring you up to speed, and I'll get with you on the other side of this. We getting there. Hey, Simeon, that's not the right one. And welcome forward. Yeah, we got to believe in something, right? And I'm not saying believe in me, and that'll make sense a little bit later on in today's program. You know, the believe in something, why not believe in me? It's really believe in we. We is me because I'm a part of you. And And so we'll button that all up a little bit later on in the program today. I want to welcome Tina Jackson Williams into the seat. And as I said a little bit earlier, she is the vice chair of the Pasadena 710 Restorative Justice Committee. So back in the 50s and 60s, eminent domain came into play, and that was kind of the first wave of kind of displacing black folks in the area and in the community. And many of these people ended up having to relocate into Altadena, but we'll unpack a lot more of that. But first, we're going to welcome Tina in. Tina, how you doing this morning?
I'm good, really good. Thank you for having me.
Pull that mic up a little bit closer.
Pull it up a
little?
little?
Yeah, pull up. There you go.
Okay, there I go.
All right. So, Tina, you're a long-time, Pasadena resident, right?
Yeah,
okay.
A Deanan.
Deanan.
Through and through. That's what we are. You know, cities have lines, but we know Deanans, Pasadena, Altadena, very connected.
Well, before we, get ready to come forward, and but I want to just ask you, what makes that so special? I mean, because you said that so proudly, Dina. Like I see you smiling right now. I see joy. What makes it so special?
It's a unique place. Pasadena, Altadena was part of that community that was redlined. So when you talk about racial covenants and redlining, we understand that in Pasadena itself, about 60% of the housing stock had racial covenants attached. So that meant that black people, brown people, Japanese Americans, Asians could only live within certain parameters of the city.
Well, we gonna get
into that.
We gonna get into that, right?
What makes Altadena special is those groups live together. By virtue of having to be limited to a certain space, you got all these folks from black professionals to working class people. The mixture of people and diversity and culture was amazing, and that's what I grew up in.
That's what you grew up in.
Yeah. It was good.
Yeah, I think about this weekend being a holiday weekend, right? And what folks are doing now, right? We've covered a lot over this is our 12th episode, and we've talked to community members, we've talked to electeds, we've talked to subject experts. But one thing that still remains, and I can't stress this enough, is that people are still displaced, right? And that's kind of a theme that we're going to have here today. So when we come forward, we're going to continue that conversation with Tina Jackson Williams. I want to learn a little bit more about the 710 stub, that empty plot of land that kind of just sits almost like a valley, right? Like it kind of just splits through the city. I want to understand what the relationship is to the 710 freeway and the 210 freeway, and how that impacted black families in Northwest or Pasadena, pushing them up to Altadena. When we come forward, we'll continue that conversation only on KBLA Talk 1580. We got your black.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580. We knew you'd stick around. This is LA's home for progressive talk radio. Be heard. Welcome back to KBLA Talk 1580.
And welcome forward. Boy, I love me some Lady T. That's Tina Marie behind the groove off the Lady T album. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580, Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. I am your host, James Farr, and we are sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. We're talking with Tina Jackson Williams, who is the vice chair of the Pasadena 710 Restorative Justice Committee. That's a whole mouthful, right? You got a few other titles, right, Tina, and a few other things. But before we get into this freeway thing, because eminent domain is not anything new to black communities, right? And its effects of it. But you want to go back into how did black folks even end up in that part of Pasadena and then up into Altadena?
Yeah, I'm the kind of person I like to try and connect the dots, right?
Go ahead.
And so if we're talking about how did black people end up in Pasadena, Altadena area, we have to go back to about 1910. From 1910 to 1970, 6 million black people left the South, the greatest migration in U.S. history. And they were leaving because of racial terror. So black folks left to go to all parts of the country, including the West. And Isabel Wilkerson, in her book, The Warmth of Other Suns, chronicles this. It's a Pulitzer Prize-winning book. It's an amazing book. And so my grandparents, like many others, came from the South, right? Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma. And then my parents met in Arizona and then ended up in California. So they ended up first in Pasadena, then Altadena, because Pasadena, as I was saying, had a restrictive covenant. So you couldn't sell your property to a black person.
And so for those that may not know what a restricted covenant, restricted covenant means you can't sell it to you.
Can't sell it to a black person that look like me. It was illegal.
It was illegal.
Yeah.
Right.
And so these deeds that restricted who could get the property limited the places we could go. Right. So Pasadena was looked at of the West, opportunity. And then when we get there, we find, there's something happening here. Much like a little bit different, just a little more subtle than what was happening in the South, right? And so we were limited to Northwest Pasadena. Out of that and some redlining, that's where the restrictions came.
So folks had to move to a certain area.
Oh, yeah. You had west of Lake Avenue. If you try to get east of Lake Avenue, that was a dividing line in Pasadena, Lake Avenue. You didn't find black people over there, not in the 50s and 60s later on. But, yeah, that was a dividing line. And so we were restricted to Northwest Pasadena. That's where we could live, and to the community south where Friendship Church is, Old Town is. We had a cluster of people. That's where that 710 stub is.
Yeah, and I want to get there. It just as you say, you talk about these covenants. I mean, the home I live in, we're the first black family to live in. Yeah, home is over 100 years old. And it's on the east side. So I totally understand what you're saying there. So folks are kind of relegated to this pocket area, right? There's no freeways then, in these early years. The 110 is famously known as the first freeway in the United States, right?
Exactly.
Or highway. Then there's this idea of, and folks who are in Long Beach will, and folks here in Los Angeles will be familiar with the 710 freeway, which runs from Long Beach all the way up to, supposed to Pasadena, but it kind of ends.
It ends at that stub, like where Huntington Hospital, Sequoia School. So the federal government had this bright idea. They wanted to connect our country, east, west, all across. So 41,000 miles of highway started to be developed. It was an act in the late 40s. It started being enacted in the 50s and 60s. So in order to do that, they said, where can we build these highways? Well, where did they start to build them? Across the nation, in places where people of color live. And so those became it became the way in which communities were divided. It became a way of segregation, continuing to segregate communities. A freeway would split a community in half, just like it did in Pasadena. So you had the 210 in the 50s being constructed that split the African-American, Japanese, American, Mexican-American community. And so you start taking out the core, the hub of a community, the life of a community. And then you have food deserts where you didn't have them before. You see the connection where a freeway starts to take away resources. It starts to take away your living space. So you had a 210 freeway that displaced thousands of people.
Now, I'm sure people got compensated properly.
You would love to think so. So, with racial covenants and redlining. So redlining was also a way to disenfranchise folks of color. So say you living in this community, you want to get insurance for your house, but the insurance company is saying, well, it's a quote-unquote blighted neighborhood. That was a term used frequently to disenfranchise people. These were well-kept neighborhoods. You had a mix of people, but they would say, oh, it's a higher risk neighborhood, so your insurance would go up to insure your home. You had to pay more to get a home in the first place than to insurance. To get insurance, you had to pay more. So all of your costs were disproportionate to those who were not, to whites, basically.
So a lot of folks, back in those days, and this sounds crazy, right? You probably purchased a home for no more than $30,000, right?
Yeah.
Is what it was. And the work that you've been doing and the committee has been doing in terms of documenting this process. I'd like to call it stolen land, but I know they call it eminent domain.
Yeah.
But I learned that at that time there was a capital gains tax, right? So
Absolutely.
if people were underpaid or compensated for their home or their property, then they had to pay a 30% capital gains tax plus the federal government tax. So folks basically were underpaid for their lots, their homes, and then had to go find somewhere else to live. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So you have the government coming in, and as this committee was set up by the city council to determine what to do with the land. So it's a 16-member committee, an advisory group. It's the Reconnecting 710 Advisory Group. City council so the state of California said, it ain't going to go through. We can't do it. There was enough resistance to the freeway going through South Pass, Alhambra, and other places. It wasn't going to be built.
So for context, these Alhambra, South Pasadena, not to be confused like South Los Angeles, and South Pasadena is its own city.
Right.
They blocked it.
Yeah,
they didn't want it
going
for
years. Yeah,
for years.
And they had the resources to do that.
They had the state took people's homes.
Yes.
Many of those homes are still up.
Some are vacant. Some have been lived in for decades. The state let them though decay.
Yeah,
they didn't keep them up because they wanted that property. So the state came in and said, we're going to build a 210 and then the 710. The 710 was later on. 210 came first, displaced thousands of people. 710 came in to connect with that Long Beach, as most folks know, freeway, and it was blocked. But that stub, that 50 acres, is where black folks lived and where Japanese and Mexican Americans lived and thrived. It's right by $1 Million Row off of Orange Grove Boulevard. Can you believe it? Because people lived proximate. 2 blocks over, you could be where most folks are.
Palatial estates.
Exactly.
Let's listen to some sound from some of the work that you guys have been doing on this committee, because the city put together a committee, and the community is confronting the stolen land and the generational wealth that's stolen. Let's take a listen to some of this, Simeon, and then we'll continue with Tina on the other side.
Okay.
Black people moved to Altadena.
African-American community that gave up their homes in what's called the stub area is the community that really paid the price.
Northwest Pasadena was a place where people of color were redlined.
We've been booted out of Pasadena because now everybody, you see all the blacks are in Altadena because they didn't want to show you Pasadena. So therefore, you can't vote and do what you need to do in Pasadena.
With the red line issue, they want to show us properties over on the northwest or whatever, and then trying to get a loan, it was hard to get loans.
We thought that it was discrimination. Our mothers and dads sit down and talk to us. It wasn't right then. and it's not right now.
We basically developed this area in Northwest to take our homes away and to put a freeway and mash it through. It was the demise of Northwest Pasadena.
It was a black and Japanese community. They were told that eminent domain was going to be used, whether they agreed to sell or not.
In this particular case, Caltrans went out and bought up all these properties. It's not a stretch to say that Caltrans was purposely economically depressing the 710 corridor and the homes within it to try to drive more.
So that's from the Voices of the People and Families Displaced by the Freeway, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that was commissioned by the city.
Yeah.
You're part of this advisory body.
Yeah.
That you mentioned a little bit earlier. And it just, I mean, this is available on YouTube, folks. Again, that's Voices of the People and Families Displaced by the Freeway. It's available on the city's website. Tell me about this committee. Like, what is the group tasked to do?
It's a 16-member task advisory group. We're to give council recommendation on what to do with the land, basically. So anytime the city has a major project, they develop a master plan. Mm-hmm. So they hired Perkins Eastman to develop the master plan. But before that, they said, we need to understand the history. To their credit, the city said, yeah, let's understand what happened that got us in this position in the first place, right? So they hired 3 consultants, 3 historian groups. So the first one is ARG, Architectural Resource Group, ARG. So they were just to give an overview of the history. Then Allegra did the oral history piece that you had excerpts from, people heard excerpts from. And then UCLA did a study on freeways and how that impacted the 210, 710, how that impacted policy and the people of Pasadena and Altadena.
And what did those 3 institutions find out? I mean, I think I know the answer.
Yeah,
but
it's very powerful because these are facts.
Okay.
You can't dispute these. These are just facts. One is there was a different route that could have been taken for the 710, closer to the Rose Bowl, that would have had less of an impact on folks of color, but it would have had a smaller impact in many ways on the affluent. So the whites, but it would have gone through a part of their neighborhood. It would have been in the parking lot area, that area of the Rose Bowl. So there was an alternative route, but they chose not to do that. They chose to go to the heart of the African American community.
Does the report say why?
No, it doesn't.
Because I know in La Cañada, just to the west of it, the freeway is lowered versus a raised freeway, and how that appreciates or depreciates property, right?
No, I don't think they say this was intentional, the UCLA report. And it points to discriminatory practices all over the country and in our community as well, Pasadena and Altadena. It's a 100-page report. It is available online. Everything that the committee does is Brown Act. It means it's public. For public view, all the documents can be viewed by the public. So this 16-member advisory group is to advise council ultimately. We've been meeting for over 2 years, just a little over 2 years. In April, it was 2 years. And we had the consultant reports, the history report from the research that was done, that was given to us. And it all points to the same thing. This was intentional. This happened in our city, but it's happened all over the country. And it disenfranchised a large number of people. The 210, by far, thousands of people. 710, hundreds of people. So you have Friendship Church, that historic church, right? Still standing because it was a historic church. But where is the community that surrounded the church?
Well, we're going to keep that going, right?
All right.
Because I want to thread this line because you got folks that have not been made whole.
Right.
Folks that now have had to move up into Altadena.
You're absolutely right.
Right. So we'll continue this conversation with Tina Jackson Williams, who is the vice chair of the Pasadena 710 Restorative Justice Committee. Stay with us. News is up next, only on KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening to The Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. We are sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580. Heard any other talk radio lately that sounds anything like this? We didn't think so. You're listening to Unapologetically Progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
One step behind don't make you what you were. Blue collar power breathing and salt here. Pay the price, can't keep that dollar bill. It ain't much desire when you done lost the will. Talk about bad times. Can it be sad times? Told the try and young enough to split. Cop what you can, get yourself over it. That borderline don't really bother me. It ain't what you are, it's what you got to be. Talk about bad times. Hear me sad
And welcome forward, KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening to The Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, and I am your host, James Farr. We are sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. I am joined by Tina Jackson Williams, who she has like 17,000 titles that allow her to fight for our community and everything. But no, Tina and I were talking about this 710 stub is what they call it. And the 210 freeway and the displacement of black folks. You know, our audience and folks around the country know old Pasadena because that's where the Rose Parade goes every year, right? But they don't know, a lot of people don't know that was a thriving black community.
Yeah.
And it's in the 60s, 70s that they kind of start snatching, stealing land, is like I like to call it. They stole the land, right? Through legislative policies, freeway expansion. And then folks end up having to relocate. Where do they go?
Many of those folks, and we don't have exact numbers, but many of those folks ended up in Altadena. Because while Pasadena had 60% of their housing you couldn't get into if you were black, Altadena was less restrictive. It had some restrictions, but it was less than Pasadena. So people who couldn't find homes in Pasadena after this displacement moved to Altadena. And that became a haven. And that became that close-knit community. You asked me why I loved it so much. Because everybody knew everybody. And you still could know folks. You know, we knew everybody around the corner on our street. When I grew up in Altadena, we knew everybody on our street and around the corner. You can go outside and play. It's rural. It's fun. It's a mix of people. It's a unique setting.
Well, you know, I've played with, and the KBLA delegation has heard me say this a couple of times. I said if Wakanda were an actual real place, Altadena would be one of the communities, right?
It would. You know, it was fun. Right? You had horses. You ride your bike. You did all the activity, and you felt safe in your community.
So you wanted to talk more about the legislation, like the covenants and kind of some of the other things.
Well, it's just like when you're talking about removal of a people, UCLA's report said they could conclude this was like racial erasure. That's a heavy term.
It is.
How do you erase a group of people? How do you remove people from a community? And the policies, whether intentional or not, had that effect of removing primarily African American, because in that stub area, the largest population was African American in the 710 stub area.
So one of the things that I learned from the documentary is that, you know, for cities like Pasadena and most developed cities, right, having such a large parcel of land, right, just undeveloped, right, is not really heard of, right? And so this, once it's actually built or decided what's going to happen there, this will be the largest development.
Pasadena is built out. So you have now an opportunity, and the city says it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They want to do it right. So they want to make sure they're hearing the voices of the people. And that's why people got to show up and let their voices be heard at these community meetings. So you have a population in Pasadena that used to be over 20% in the 80s. Now we're 7-8%. We're talking racial displacement, racial erasure. You had Altadena, well over 40% of Altadena used to be African American. Now you're at 18%. Why? Where are people going? Why do people leave? And so we have to connect the dots into what's happened historically to our people that has displaced them and moved them to Altadena, now moving them out of Altadena. And you see the through line. You see people who were disenfranchised, lost generational wealth from the 710 stub, moved to Altadena, where there are generations living there. So you're talking about a 60-year span of time. So 2 or 3 generations, then they get their homes are lost by the fire. Compounded woundedness.
Compounded wounded. That's heavy.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard compounded woundedness. You know, because I ask a burning question every episode, and my burning question this episode to you is, you know, folks in one generation were burned and displaced. Not literally burned, but, you know, they were burned. But my question is, you know, with this displacement of folks that have been burned out of this fire, I know they're totally two different things, Tina. I mean, but you're talking about through lines. I see a connection that once again, black folks, and these are some of the same people. Yeah. They got burned.
Right. You're talking about a large population of home ownership in both places. So in the stub area, there were renters that got no compensation, zero. When they were asked to leave, they got zero compensation. You have black people who owned homes got a depreciated value of compensation, right? But there was a large population of home ownership. In Altadena, over 80% of the African-American population owns their home. That's almost double of the nationwide average. So you're talking about a group of people that mobilized, that came together, that lived together, that educated their children, that worshiped in the same place, and created a milieu, a population that was very positive, right? And then you see the through line of moving out of Pasadena to Altadena and then, getting burned again.
What are you gonna miss about the community? I mean, I'm not. I don't want to talk in absolute terms, but I could talk real.
We're pushing back. The Center for Restorative Justice tells the story, tells the history. It's right in Pasadena. Green Line Housing Foundation was developed to address the issue of black and brown home ownership, and now with the Eaton Fire, they have given out grants for people that have been displaced. Their hope and their desire is to keep black people and brown people, the folks that have been hit the hardest, get them back in Altadena. They're only one foundation that can do that. They're one of some others, but they're the primary one that looks at race-based policies need race-based solutions. That's what Green Line says. I have hope. I know there are many people. We were displaced, our family. We had to evacuate for about 3 weeks. I was over in Old Town area. I saw so many I saw more black people than I've seen in years. I'm like, where have all the black people have come back to Pasadena? Wow.
Boy, Tina, we got about a minute before I got to move forward. Okay. What do you want people to know?
There's a grassroots organization called Restorative Justice Pasadena. So I'm a part of 2 groups. One is the city side, but then there's the grassroots side. You can go to that website, restorativejustic.com, and look at what we're saying we want the city to do. We've heard all the reports. We've done our own research, and we're saying 9 things need to happen. I won't go through all of them.
Come on, go ahead. You got it. Yeah, go through them real quick. Though.
Reparations for home ownership. Homes were lost. Homes need to be replaced.
Okay.
Change in the affordable housing policy to give first priority to displaced folks, not 6th. First, dedicated complex for entrepreneurship. Businesses were lost. How do you bring businesses back? You're talking about reconnecting. These are the things that were lost. An immersive museum that tells the story. Increase in local hires. Free tuition for vocational technical programs for the descendants of that 710 stub. an apology that comes from the mayor's office, the mayor himself, for what City of Pasadena did. A reparations oversight committee, because this is a 10 to 20 year process. Who's going to watch out to make sure they're doing what they're saying they're going to do? And then a community benefits agreement with the city, developers, and community all agreeing to what kind of development should be done in that stub. So those are the things we've outlined. We're hearing from community saying, what we ask community, what do you want to see? We're asking the descendants, what do you guys want? So we're advocating for the descendants to have a say and to gain from any development that happens in the 710 stub, to benefit from it.
That's Tina Jackson Williams, Vice Chair of the Pasadena 710 Restorative Justice Committee. I just got
too many titles. Don't worry about
someone
it.
told me, y'all, the city can keep the apology, run in their reparations. When we come forward, Tina, thank you so much for. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you
and
for
talking
having
with
me.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
When we come forward, we'll have some updates for you only on KBLA Talk 1580, your ancestors' favorite radio station.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power. This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
The cop shot the kid, the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the cop shot the kid.
I don't wanna hurt nobody. We just came here to party, see a few dames, exchange some names. I'm a top shot the kid, stay in your lane. The cop shot the kid.
KBLA Talk 1580. Welcome forward. You're listening to the Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. I'm your host, James Farr. We are sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. Man, this thing goes by fast. And we just had a good conversation with Tina Jackson Williams. I got some updates for you. Loma Alta Park has reopened, and I know how many people are so excited that there's some outdoors recreation, especially on this holiday weekend. And folks, if you really knew the history, and I don't have enough time to get into it, but I challenge you to really Google, do a little bit of research on what the true history of Memorial Day is. And it ain't what you think it is. I'm with the ancestors and those who fought for the liberation of our people back in the 1800s. Tomorrow is May 25th. It marks the 5th Angelversary, the day that our dear brother's life was stolen, the day that our beloved George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin in Minnesota. Tomorrow makes 5 years. And BLM Grassroots, Black Lives Matter Grassroots, Black Lives Matters Los Angeles, and their chapters around the country will be commemorating and holding space and visual. And when we look at where this country is now, I know that's a different show. You were just listening to This Is Not a Drill, and that's not this show, but I would be remiss if I didn't make sure that we, hold that space. I would hold a moment of silence, but, we can't do dead air on radio. So I think about where we were as a society, where we were as a community. Right here where I'm sitting in Leimert Park is where Black Lives Matter first was activated. It was right across the street in the park following yet again another murder of Trayvon Martin. So, we think about where we all were 5 years ago in the middle of a pandemic. We had saw Ahmaud Arbery, we had saw Breonna Taylor, and of course we saw George Floyd. And then in my local community, Anthony McLean, who was gunned down by Pasadena police officer Anthony Dumagwendon while running away from a traffic stop. I don't know how much has changed. And that's not even what I'm supposed to be talking about. We're supposed to be talking about the roots, the resilience, the recovery, the rebuilding, and the reunion of the community of Altadena soon. It's happening, y'all, but we got a long ways to go. When we come forward, y'all know how we do this before we get out of here. I got a Saturday slap. I think y'all gonna like it. Only on KBLA Talk 1580, Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. We are sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
Shot the cop, shot the kid, the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the kid, the cop shot the cop shot the kid.
I don't wanna hurt nobody. We just came here to party, see a few dames, exchange some names. I'm a top shot the kid, stay in your lane. The cop shot the kid.
KBLA Talk 1580. Welcome forward. You're listening to the Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. I'm your host, James Farr. We are sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. Man, this thing goes by fast, and we just had a good conversation with Tina Jackson Williams. I got some updates for you. Loma Alta Park has reopened, and I know how many people are so excited that there's some outdoors recreation, especially on this holiday weekend. And folks, if you really knew the history, and I don't have enough time to get into it, but I challenge you to really Google, do a little bit of research on what the true history of Memorial Day is. And it ain't what you think it is. I'm with the ancestors and those who fought for the liberation of our people back in the 1800s. Tomorrow is May 25th. It marks the 5th Angelversary, the day that our dear brother's life was stolen, the day that our beloved George Floyd was murdered by Derek Chauvin in Minnesota. Tomorrow makes 5 years. And BLM Grassroots, Black Lives Matter Grassroots, Black Lives Matters Los Angeles, and their chapters around the country will be commemorating and holding space and visual. And when we look at where this country is now, I know that's a different show. You were just listening to This Is Not a Drill, and that's not this show, but I would be remiss if I didn't make sure that we, hold that space. I would hold a moment of silence, but, we can't do dead air on radio. So I think about where we were as a society, where we were as a community. Right here where I'm sitting in Leimert Park is where Black Lives Matter first was activated. It was right across the street in the park following yet again another murder of Trayvon Martin. So, we think about where we all were 5 years ago in the middle of a pandemic. We had saw Ahmaud Arbery, we had saw Breonna Taylor, and of course we saw George Floyd. And then in my local community, Anthony McLean, who was gunned down by Pasadena police officer Anthony Dumagwendon while running away from a traffic stop. I don't know how much has changed. And that's not even what I'm supposed to be talking about. We're supposed to be talking about the roots, the resilience, the recovery, the rebuilding, and the reunion of the community of Altadena. Soon. It's happening, y'all, but we got a long ways to go. When we come forward, y'all know how we do this before we get out of here. I got a Saturday slap. I think y'all gonna like it. Only on KBLA Talk 1580, Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. We are sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
Founded in Los Angeles in 1986,
Litigation powerhouse Quinn Emanuel has deep roots in the Los Angeles community. Since 2007, we have litigated some of the largest fires on the West Coast. We are proud to be the only AmLaw 100 firm in the country to represent wildfire victims, giving affected individuals, families, and businesses the same focus and individualized attention we devote to our Fortune 500 clients. BTI Consulting has repeatedly recognized Quinn Emanuel as among the 4 law firms in-house counsel least liked to oppose in any litigation, and we are often deemed the most feared. And after securing over $80 billion for our clients in various matters firm-wide, we understand why. If you have been affected by the recent wildfires in Altadena and the Palisades and would like to discuss your situation further, please contact wildfire support at QuinnEmanuel.com or call us at 213-443-3050. Quinn Emanuel is proud to sponsor Conversation Live Altadena Rising with James Farr on KBLA Talk 1580.
Attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee future outcomes.
Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
And welcome forward. KBLA Talk 1580. You're listening to the Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. I am your host, James Farr. We're sponsored in part by Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. It's kind of coming to that time of the program, y'all. I mean, it's been a good one. I enjoy every opportunity I have to get behind the mic, but you know, this is the Memorial Day weekend, and I want some barbecue. As I was coming into the studio, you know, everything happens at Leimert Park, including barbecue, and so I was smelling something, so I done got my fingers ready to get out there and get some barbecue. Folks, I know it's going to be different for y'all. At least y'all that are used to spending time in your backyards, the cookout, the barbecues in Altadena. I mean, folks had beautiful properties, beautiful pits, beautiful swimming pools, and, you know, you may be recreating and gathering in different spaces, and it may not seem too familiar, right? But, you know, love is something that is deep within me, and I love people. And I really want y'all to have this lovers holiday. Let that breathe a little bit, Simeon. That's change. I love that song. So it's Memorial Day weekend, y'all. Be safe out there. You know, have a rib or two for me. You know, if some of y'all off the pork, you know, I hear turkey ribs is good. Actually, I've had them before. In Buffalo, New York. Y'all try that. I ain't doing no vegan stuff with you. Miss me with all of that. Enjoy the weekend. Simeon on the boards. Thank you so much. The entire team that helps produce Conversation Live Altadena Rising. That's Kim. That's Reggie. That's Nyla. Tiana does the graphics. And I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. But hey, I really appreciate y'all spending this time with me. Angela Roddick Wright and the Legal Lens is up next. She has an amazing program. I say every week, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel a little bit more like one every time I listen to her program. She brings the fire, right? We're going to let this go. Until we have another opportunity to speak with you, as always, I'll see you next week. Agape.